Okay, we're back in the Super Week studio, and I am joined by Caio, Paula, and Chris. Welcome. All three of you work in data-related roles in very large enterprise organizations, and that's why I got the three of you together with the couch. I want to understand what it is like to foster this community of analytics, of data-driven people within these large organizations. So from what I've heard, there's unique challenges that not all people will be exposed to, especially if you work with maybe smaller agencies or smaller companies. And I want to dive into a couple of topics. So we quickly mentioned, want to talk about people, which is obviously a big aspect, process, technology, maybe a little bit, but I think we can keep that one small. And you guys, all three of you mentioned culture is very important. So I think we should actually start with culture, as you all very much reacted to that. So Caio, I want to start with you. What does culture mean to you when we speak about culture in a large enterprise?
So when you're talking about large enterprises, what ends up happening very frequently is that you have groups with very different levels of maturity, literacy in data within the organization. And culture is this element that can help bring together and level up the organization. So the idea is that once you're able to create this culture of that creates almost like a dynamic of fear of missing out, then you see that other parts of the organization are doing really well because they are doing something different. Then it creates this willing to understand, okay, what are they doing different? What should I start doing? And there's a huge role of leadership in this. So if the leadership is not actually doing the questions, and I think data literacy has more about actually asking the right questions than having all the answers, it's really hard to create getting to this tipping point when everybody around say, oh, this team is doing something different and I should start take a look at what they're doing and trying to implement this in my team as well.
It's very interesting. I thought you were going to say creating this area of like inclusivity, getting everybody along, but you actually flipped it around. You were like, you kind of have to make the other departments, so to say, jealous. Like, hey, look how good they're doing, to kind of trigger them. Do you recognize that?
I don't know. Correct me if I perceived it wrong, but I don't think that this is something that you do intentionally. You don't want to have anybody feel bad about not having that thing in place that you achieved. But you can achieve, or you can come to that point a bit subversively in leading by example, and in creating North Stars would be too big of a buzzword, but to have that kind of examples ready so that others see, okay, if we do it that way, like other parts of our organization did, we can create great outcome and we can accelerate things and we can benefit from it with each other without being separated from each other. Yeah. That's my experience.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think it's both. It needs to come from, the folks doing the work, but it also really leadership needs to be brought along. And I think in the work that we do, often it's pretty easy to tell the story, especially in the world of experimentation. You can, prove with statistical significance, that you've driven a success metric forward. And if you can get that going and then get leadership recognizing the value, then I think, to your point, it is pretty easy to create I won't say competitiveness, but the fear of missing out. If leadership is really recognizing a team that's doing it well, the others will start to follow.
To what extent, if you would have to put a ratio on the amount of bottom-up, top-down, to what extent you would say, is it bottom-up practitioners showing their work, so to say? Mm-hmm. And to what extent the top-down buy-in of it forcibly being shown across the company? Is there a ratio you could put on that?
I think it differs by maturity of the organization, in my experience. I think it begins a little bit bottom up because leadership might not even be aware of some of the capabilities and some of the value. So you do have to show it early. But as the enterprise matures and leadership begins to recognize the value, then I think the ratio increases and it's
they start to realize like how it impacts their bottom line, and then it becomes self. Yeah,
that's right.
Putting on top of that, there is a very important role in leadership in creating psychological safety for the bottom up here. Because if the team doesn't feel they have safety, psychological safety to share that the data might actually be pointing to a different direction than we believed we should be going, or we think things are on one way, but actually the data is showing something completely different. And if this team needs to feel safe enough to speak up and to prove that, okay, maybe our strategy is not exactly, we should review our strategy. So I think it's part of the leadership to actually create this environment when the team can thrive with data. Because otherwise you might have excellent professionals in your team, but if they don't feel they have enough space to speak up about what the data is telling, we won't be able to create this culture.
Yeah, like the classical highest paid person's opinion syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah, in our case, that is actually not our key audience that we talk to as a team when we do communication into the organization. Good for us, to be honest, because Caio just mentioned one very important aspect of it. It's trust. It's feeling safe. Because if you listen to Luca's presentation just before lunch break, he was pretty much talking about that, how important that is, that keep up the conversation in a very trustful environment, because if you don't find those places, there won't be any conversation at all, because people might feel exposing themselves for what they consider themselves to be stupid questions. And as we all know, there is no stupid questions. I'm also happy to answer the question, what does unspecified mean and where do I change the reporting period? We've all started there, right? And so people should never felt exposed, because then they shy away from any sort of conversation, and then all your effort is pointless, because there will be no room for your output.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any like tactical takeaways? Because I can imagine large companies, very busy people, large organizations, multiple groups of people. They're not necessarily communicating. They might not even know they exist of each other, right? But you want to share this way of thinking. Do you do like free pizza events? Like what are like, are there any tactical things? Like what have you seen work in your career, perhaps, to get that? Yeah, to get people to start contributing and participating.
I think experimentation is an easy way to do it. You can create a bit of a guessing game. You know, with
the visual
the company,
aspect is
the
really
visual
appealing.
aspect, yes. Which one, vote? Which one do you think won and why? But I think to both of the points you all made about trust, I think we really need to get leadership to understand, to talk about learning. So everything is a learning, whether it was a successful test or not. We've learned something from the work that's been done. And so I think that helps create a bit of a trustful environment, that none of your work is for naught. We're learning something, regardless. So we talk a lot about that in all the communications, things that we've learned. But yeah, tactically, a little competitiveness is always fun.
Yeah. Anything that pops to mind for you guys?
Yeah, exactly. So once people discover how much joy it can be to share positive outcome or positive output with each other, with one another, they continue engaging. And we have that thing that we call analytics community. It's more than analytics, but that's the title now, and we can't change it, or we won't change it anymore because we're happy with that. And people keep engaging with that. As you can imagine, we are a huge organization with lots of divisions, and sometimes we get questions that are pretty technical in answering the question how metrics work or how a dimension is defined, and that's fine. But we're getting more to the point of people asking, hey, I have this and that use case. What can I use best to answer this and that question? And that goes into the direction that Jill and Maddie were about yesterday, which I absolutely loved. And that is something we want to push, and that is something we want to see there, because then you have that kind of cross-pollination all along the company, which is much better than thinking about theoretical. And that is the pitfall some big organizations fall for. Yeah, let's write something, and then we push it in organization, and then it should trickle down. That's not how it goes, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
So you're more rewarding good behavior continuously. That's like once you see it, you...
Without actually doing that, but it's a mental thing, emotional thing that happens by itself,
Two things I've been seeing working very well. One is almost creating for cross-collaboration, hackathon style. So big corporations have very, very interesting, capable people that think in different ways. So how can we take advantage of this? We have this huge business challenge. Let's create a hackathon and see across the organization who wants to participate and brainstorm and what the possible solutions we can create to actually solve this challenge. And internally within teams, I think it's important for frequency matters. So we need to create this culture. We need to create the frequency of acting data-oriented. So one simple thing that I've seen working very well is no PowerPoint meetings. Let's open the dashboard. Let's make the data available to everyone to follow through and open the dashboard and discuss on top of the data itself. And this can go a long way if we do it frequently enough, and people start getting more used to the data. It becomes more natural to them to understand how we follow and the operation through data.
Yeah, simple repetition to make it stick, basically. Yeah, I like the hackathon idea. I've also seen that work. So as an outsider, sometimes working with enterprises, my main challenge is the roadmap, getting prioritized on the roadmap. And the hackathons kind of hack the roadmap, right? So you can often get something done way quicker, or at least a minimal version of something, and then get people hyped up about it, and hopefully then you get a bit more priority on the real roadmap. So yeah, I've seen that work as well.
Yeah.
So all of this is about people. Now, I think for large organizations as the ones you work at, people are very well compensated. There is probably a lot of inbound people that are willing to work at the company. But there's probably a lot of other struggles you have in finding the right people for your team or crafting your team. What are the things that people might not realize that are important for working in a data-related organization in a large company? What are the non-obvious things that you have to be good at or have to understand or have to know?
Working for a big organization means that you gotta have patience, and because we are not that agile, as you might know your work operations, while being with an agency or being an external consultant. You can, if you're working from external or self-employed, you can come in, shoot your shot, and then leave. You mentioned the aspect of road mapping. Road mapping is a whole different thing.
It's an art.
The bigger the organization, you don't have to like any piece of art, every piece of art. It's in the eye of the spectator sometimes, and that aspect makes it sometimes hard to get the right talents on board, because they are like, compensations aside, they're like, no, I want to get my stuff done. I want to have, let's articulate ideas, let's make plans, and then act on it.
Short feedback loop.
Short feedback loop. And that is one thing that you have to learn, that sometimes things might take longer to get into place.
I see you both nodding, so patience is definitely on the list. Any others that come to mind?
I'd say internal sponsorship. So if you want to change something, you need to really understand like who are the areas within the organization that are going to be are going to benefit the most out of it, and get the sponsorship from start. This makes way easier to unlock roadmaps and get a priority between all the teams that needs to be involved in order to make that happen.
So you could almost say sales soft skills, internal sales, right? Yeah. Yeah, politics, navigating.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
In any job, right?
Yeah. Well, but I do think that the argument, like the smaller the company, often less politics, more, right?
Yep.
And that just doesn't happen the larger the group of people. So. Anything that comes to mind for you, Paula, that hasn't been mentioned?
For us, what we've found is that we've matured enough, I think, in our program to be pretty data-driven. And so there's a curiosity and a collaborative sense. We have a lot of cross-functional teams. And, sometimes the product manager might ultimately drive the roadmap and the prioritization of the work, but, anyone on the team can sort of make their case and try and convince. Ideally, the whole team is pretty much in agreement with those decisions. And so people who can, there might be a developer who, is a wonderful coder, but they also need to understand the customer research, and they need to understand the data and understand the bigger picture of what they're doing, so they can sort of advocate for the things that they believe, are the right things to do, and how we should be prioritizing the work and the backlog. So that's a hard thing to interview for, but understanding just sort of collaborative nature and being objective about what the data might be telling us or what our customers might be telling us is important.
I do think it's interesting. Like I would be curious, are there any traits where it's an instant no, like this is not going to work out?
I think when you're interviewing someone and you can tell that they think they know the answers, know all the answers, that sort of runs counter to the way we want to try and behave. We want to be questioners instead of
open to the data. Yeah. Well, I think that's a nice segue, because the people you just described, some people call them consultants. Yeah, they know all the answers. How do you work with external partners? So obviously you have very large teams, you have a lot of knowledge in-house, but I think for some knowledge it's either very hard to get it in-house, or sometimes it just doesn't make sense to have it in-house. Let's start with the benefits. What is the upside of getting outside help? Like, how do you use it from a political point of view, from like to make cases that you normally couldn't make, or like a...
It's just the obvious things, to up the capacity, to be more, or to bridge gaps that we might have in individual skill sets, to do that temporarily. But to the question of how do we get along with them, I think we have made best experience with, we do not do any kind of separations. If they work with our team, they're part of the team. And that we get great payback on that fact.
Yeah, Till mentioned that in his talk also, that there's basically multiple agencies that are part of the team.
The fact that their business card has a different design than ours, and that their email address has a different ending than ours, that is not. That should never make a difference in daily work.
I think it makes a lot of sense when specialization is key. And when you're implementing data projects, at some point you might need a very specific set of skills that it is either hard to find, or also that it doesn't make so much sense to have that skill permanently, because you won't be able to challenge that professional.
Exactly, they will get bored.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that for me, that's a very classic moment when you like to bring partners to help not only execute but also to transfer some part of that skill set to your team, enough so they can then on the next once that is fully implemented, they can maintain it.
Mm-hmm. I think in a large enterprise, so often we're bringing consultants who will, train us to train others, or, like you said, sort of temporarily set up a model or a framework, and then we take it and implement it. So I think that's the kind of consultancy we might be looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, is there in your eyes a difference? So you mentioned agency and basically people doing the work, right? Like people who are actually, let's say, implementing something together with you.
For example.
Then there's also consultancy, right? Where you could argue it's more about, let's call it thought-provoking. Mm-hmm. Do you see different roles there and different interests? Like what I'm trying to fish for is like, where are there moments where it's interesting to get somebody from the outside to say something that you cannot say inside? Like,
sure.
I'll develop on top on that. I would say it's even more interesting I'll rephrase it, to see something from the outside that you cannot see from the inside. Sometimes you're so deep connected to the day-to-day and the activities that are happening around you that you might be blind for the bigger picture. And having someone outside helping you look at from a different perspective can be very helpful.
Yeah. I think we're moving towards wrapping up a little bit. I know it's for all three of you, it's your first Super Week. So if there's any other large company practitioners watching, what's the reason to come or not come? But I think all three of you are very positive. So what's the reason to come to Super Week? What is the thing that you picked up here that is really valuable to you?
Wow, there's so many. I don't want to steal too much time, but I think the most important thing that I think I've mentioned that earlier, it doesn't feel like a typical conference. It feels like more like a community gathering for people that do some sort of work in the same discipline and industry, but not showing off in front of each other to pat their own egos. I think everyone is about and everyone is trying to learn from one another, and that is something that I've never experienced with any other sort of that outreach and that size of a conference. So that's my recommendation. Yeah.
Nice.
I agree. There's a magic that happens when you're all together for a long period of time. 5 days is a long conference, but we're all together in the same place and no one's leaving. So from morning to night.
The hotel's picked for that reason.
That's
you cannot go anywhere.
That's right. And it's really fantastic. I think the content is superb, but just the amount of free time and the time that everybody really invests in diving deep and asking each other questions and learning from each other is really rare, I think. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Curiosity. I feel that everybody here is eager to learn and open to share learnings and best practice and what they see working, what they have seen not working, and it's one of a kind, honestly. I've been to many different conventions, and this one is definitely one of a kind.
Agree.
Nice. I'm glad I asked you guys, because these are raving reviews. So Soli will be happy with me. I hope you get to enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you for sharing your insights. It was really useful. And talk to you later at Super Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.